The desolate landscape stretched out like a graveyard, scattered with broken metal and scorched earth. The air hung heavy with the stench of burnt remains and despair. Private Elias Quinn, a soldier from the Galactic Defense Corps, trudged through the wreckage of the barren planet, Tarnus. His armor, stained with soot and blood, weighed heavily on him, just as much as the guilt gnawing at his conscience. He was the sole survivor of his squad, left with only one mission: to reach the extraction point. His tactical scanner flickered weakly, its low hum blending into the unsettling silence. He tightened his grip on his pulse rifle, its barrel still warm from the skirmishes earlier. His breath came in short, ragged gasps, the thin atmosphere reminding him of how near death was. Then, his scanner beeped. A weak signal, a trace of life, or perhaps just malfunctioning tech. His heart skipped a beat. Instinctively he moved faster, drawn by a mix of dread and hope. As he rounded the corner of a collapsed energy tower, he froze. Beneath a pile of jagged debris lay a figure, a woman with pale violet skin and long silver hair. Her life signs were faint, but she was alive. Her breathing was shallow, barely noticeable under the crumpled remnants of her armor. Elias dropped to his knees, his weapon raised. Her golden eyes fluttered open, locking with his. "Help," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Do you understand me?" Elias asked, his voice thick with disbelief. She nodded weakly, her eyes betraying a silent strength. "I'm Alira Saris of the Nova Guard," she said softly. Elias's jaw tightened. The Nova Guard were known for their incredible precision and grace in combat, yet here was one of their elite soldiers, vulnerable and helpless. Elias worked quickly, clearing the debris, but Alira's voice stopped him. "Why would you risk this for me? I'm of no use to you." "You're not being left behind," he replied firmly, his voice filled with resolve. "That's not how we do things." Her skeptical gaze lingered on him, her hopes tempered by past betrayal. "My unit left me," she murmured. "They didn't think I was worth saving." Elias paused. He had seen many horrors in war, but abandoning an ally, especially one so skilled, was a line he couldn't fathom. Just as he resumed his task, a low rumble echoed through the ground, followed by the shrill whine of the warning sirens in his armor. The Cathark, the relentless biomechanical predators, were closing in. "We've got company," Elias muttered. He lifted Alira from the rubble. Her body was unnaturally light, her legs dangling limp from spinal injury. She whispered once more, "You should leave me." "No," Elias said firmly, his tone unwavering. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The scanner now blinked, showing multiple heat signatures rapidly closing in. He adjusted Alira on his back, her fragile arms wrapping weakly around his shoulders. Every step was a struggle, but they couldn't stop now. "They'll be here any second," Alira warned. "You don't stand a chance against them alone." "Then I'd better move fast," Elias replied, pushing forward. They sprinted toward a ravine, the terrain becoming increasingly treacherous. Jagged rocks threatened to trip him, but he kept moving, the metallic scraping of the Cathark's claws echoing behind them. "There's a Nova outpost 2 kilometers east," Alira said, her voice steady despite the pain. "If it's still operational, they might have a medical unit." Elias adjusted his course without hesitation. "Let's hope your allies built their outposts tougher than their loyalty," he quipped, masking the fear gnawing at him. As they reached the edge of the canyon, the first Cathark appeared over a ridge, its insectoid form gleaming under the dim sky. It clicked its mandibles, sending out a signal to its pack. Elias fired a quick burst, tearing through its carapace, but more of the creatures surged forward, undeterred. "Hurry!" Alira urged. "I'm trying!" Elias shot back, his breath ragged as more of the creatures closed in. He veered toward a narrow canyon, hoping to bottleneck the Cathark. With every shot, he bought them a few more precious seconds. They reached the outpost's entrance just as the first wave of Cathark poured into the canyon mouth. Elias sat Alira down and slammed his fist into the console. "Come on, come on!" The turrets roared to life, plasma bolts cutting through the advancing creatures. He slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. "You saved me," Alira said, her golden eyes locking onto his. Yeah, well, Elias replied with a faint smile. Not much of a soldier if I didn't. But deep down, he knew this battle was just beginning, far bigger than anything he had expected. To balance the odds, Ren's gaze scanned the outpost, her mind racing. There's a secondary power core deeper inside. If we overload it, the explosion should be powerful enough to take out the whole swarm, and us along with it, Jonathan pointed out. Not if we time it right, Ren countered. The detonation delay will give us just enough time to escape. Jonathan studied her, the determination in her golden eyes leaving no room for doubt. Lead the way. They retreated into the outpost, with the Kixans hot on their heels. The corridors twisted and turned, designed both to disorient and defend. Ren, with her deep knowledge of Velk architecture, led the way. The secondary power core was housed in a chamber reinforced with alien alloys. Ren quickly approached the console, her hands moving with precision. The core hummed, its energy levels rising rapidly. 3 minutes, Ren announced, her voice steady. We need to move. Jonathan nodded, but paused to glance at her. Are you sure about this? Ren met his gaze. If we don't do this, they'll overrun the entire sector. We have no choice. The sound of the Konans grew louder, their screeches reverberating through the corridors. Jonathan took point, his rifle ready. Let's go! They moved quickly through the labyrinthine passageways, Jonathan covering their rear with his plasma rifle, picking off nearby pursuers. Ren led them toward an emergency exit, her pace relentless. Just a little farther, she urged, cutting through the chaos. The final stretch felt like a gauntlet. Kixans swarmed from all directions, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm them. Jonathan fought with desperation, every shot buying them a little more time. Ren, keep moving, he shouted, his voice hoarse. She hesitated, glancing back at him. A fleeting, unspoken moment passed between them, before she turned and ran, graceful and swift. Jonathan followed, his legs burning with exertion. The emergency exit was just ahead, a faint light signaling their salvation. Behind them, the power core's hum reached a crescendo. The air grew thick with static, the walls vibrating with energy. Jump! Ren commanded. They dove through the opening, and just as they did, the core detonated. The shockwave tore through the outpost, a blinding flash engulfing the Kixans. Jonathan and Ren hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from their lungs. When the dust settled, Jonathan rolled onto his back, staring at the star-filled sky. Ren lay still for a moment before propping herself up on her elbows. Well, Jonathan said dryly, that was a hell of a plan. Ren chuckled softly, her voice warm despite the chaos. I'll admit, I wasn't sure we'd make it. Jonathan turned to look at her, a grin tugging at his lips. Glad you didn't tell me that earlier. She smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the faint starlight. Thank you, Jonathan. For everything, she said sincerely. Jonathan nodded in silent acknowledgement, their bond forged through the fires of battle. But even as they lay there catching their breath, they knew the war was far from over. The Kixans were relentless. We should move, Ren said, her tone regretful. They'll send more. Jonathan pushed himself to his feet and offered her a hand. Then we better make sure they regret it. They walked into the darkness together, two survivors bound by determination, their resolve to fight for a future worth living still unwavering. Ren acknowledged him with a brief nod, the rare praise from the Valuri clearly sincere. Do you have medical support on board? She asked, her tone brisk. The squad leader motioned toward one of the ships. Our medics are ready to assist. Both of you need an evaluation. Jonathan hesitated, casting a glance toward the horizon where the Kixans had come from. The memory of their relentless assault was still fresh in his mind. Are you sure reinforcements will be enough? That swarm was just the beginning. The Valuri leader's expression hardened. We've dispatched additional forces. The Kazans won't breach this sector again. Jonathan didn't share the leader's confidence but chose not to argue. Survival came first. Come on, Jonathan, Ren said, motioning toward one of the smaller ships. Let's get you checked out before you collapse. He chuckled, though the sound was strained. You're not wrong. Inside the ship, the soft glow of bioluminescence bathed the interior as Valuri medics efficiently tended to them. One approached Jonathan, scanning him with a device. "You've sustained significant strain," the medic said in a clinical tone. "You should rest immediately." "I'll rest when I'm dead," Jonathan replied with a tired grin, though he allowed the medic to guide him to a reclining seat. Ren observed quietly from a distance, her expression softening. The human's resilience had been extraordinary. Without saying it aloud, she felt a deep sense of gratitude, and something more. When the medic finished, Ren approached Jonathan and sat beside him. "You've saved my life more times than I can count today," she said softly. "I owe you." Jonathan waved it off, offering a tired smile. "You'd have done the same." "Not all of my kind would agree," she murmured, her gaze distant. "You've shown me something different. Something worth believing in." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "And here I thought Valuri didn't trust humans." She gave a faint smile. "Perhaps we've underestimated you before." Before Jonathan could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Incoming message from command. Coordinates for the next operation have been uploaded." Ren immediately stood, her demeanor shifting back to that of a composed soldier. "We're not done yet," Jonathan groaned, pushing himself to his feet. "Figures. War doesn't wait for anyone." As the ship lifted off, the Valuri fleet regrouped for the next mission. Jonathan and Ren stood side by side, their bond unspoken but undeniable. They had survived together against impossible odds, and whatever came next, they knew they would face it together. The war wasn't over, and the Cakesands would return. But Jonathan and Ren were ready. Together, they would show the galaxy what humanity and their fragile alliance were truly capable of. The Valuri command ship was a marvel of engineering, its vast corridors humming with quiet energy. Jonathan followed Ren through the labyrinthine halls, his footsteps echoing on the polished metal floors. Valuri soldiers moved with precision, their eyes sharp and purposeful. Despite his exhaustion, Jonathan couldn't help but feel a pang of curiosity. "So, what's the plan now?" he asked, breaking the silence. Ren glanced back at him. "Command wants a debrief on the Keksan swarm we faced. They're also planning the next offensive. We'll need every advantage we can get." Jonathan tightened his grip on his rifle. "If they're adapting as quickly as you say, we'd better act soon." They entered a large chamber dominated by a central holotable, surrounded by Valuri commanders. One, a tall figure with an air of authority, turned toward them as they approached. "Ren Alara," the commander said, his voice deep and commanding. "We've reviewed your signal and the data from the outpost. Your efforts, and those of the human, were instrumental in holding the line." Ren inclined her head. "Thank you, Commander. We did what was necessary." The commander's gaze shifted to Jonathan. "And you, human," he said, appraising him. "Your actions were unexpected. Few would risk so much for an ally, especially one not of their own species." Jonathan met the commander's gaze evenly. War isn't just about survival. It's about fighting for what's right. Leaving someone behind isn't how we do things. The room fell silent as the weight of his words hung in the air. Ren smiled faintly, her golden eyes softening as she looked at him. The commander broke the silence. "You've proven yourself a valuable ally, Jonathan Kane. We could use more like you in this war." Jonathan smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." The commander gestured toward the holotable, which displayed the galaxy divided into zones marked with Valuri and Xan activity. "The Xan's adaptability is their greatest strength and our greatest challenge," he said. "Their hive mind evolves with every encounter, learning from their losses. We must strike at their core before they can overwhelm us entirely." Ren leaned forward, her expression intent. "Do we know where their central hive is located?" The commander nodded, expanding the map to show a dense cluster of stars. "In the Zaris Nebula. Intelligence suggests this is the heart of their operations. If we can destroy it, we might cripple their ability to adapt." Jonathan studied the map, his mind racing. "That's deep in Kazan territory. You'll need a small team to get in and out without drawing too much attention." The commander's gaze sharpened. "Precisely. and we believe you two are uniquely suited for this mission." Jonathan blinked, caught off guard. "Us? Are you serious?" The commander nodded. "You've proven your resourcefulness and resilience. Ren's knowledge of Valuri technology, combined with your unpredictability, gives us an edge." Ren turned to Jonathan, her expression both determined and wary. "It's a risk, but one worth taking. What do you think?" Jonathan hesitated, the weight of the decision heavy on him. He thought of the lives lost, the worlds destroyed, and the countless battles fought. If this mission could end the war, or at least turn the tide, it was worth it. "I'm in," he said, his voice steady. Ren nodded, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "Then so am I." The commander pressed a button on the holotable, and the map shifted to reveal a detailed plan for their infiltration. "You'll depart immediately. A stealth vessel is being prepared, equipped with the latest Valuri cloaking technology. Your objective is to plant a destabilization device at the hive's core. Once activated, it will disrupt their hive mind, giving us the upper hand." Jonathan exchanged a glance with Ren, a silent understanding passing between them. This mission would test them like never before, but they had faced impossible odds and survived. As the briefing ended, they were escorted to the hangar, where a sleek black ship awaited them. Ren ran her hand along its smooth surface, her gaze contemplative. "Ready for one more fight?" Jonathan asked lightly, despite the tension. Ren turned to him, her golden eyes gleaming with determination. "Always." They boarded the vessel, the hum of its engines filling the cabin as it prepared for launch. Jonathan strapped himself in, glancing at Ren as she took the pilot's seat. "Let's finish this," he said resolutely. Ren smiled, a rare warmth breaking through her stoic demeanor. Together. As the ship lifted off, disappearing into the void of space, Jonathan and Ren knew the road ahead would be perilous. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they felt a glimmer of hope. Together they would face the unknown and carve out a future worth fighting for. The stealth ship glided through the dense clouds of the Tarnus Nebula like a phantom, its cloaking field rendering it invisible to the Kexan sentinels that patrolled the region. Jonathan sat in the co-pilot's seat, his hands gripping the armrests as the vessel jolted through pockets of turbulence. Beside him, Ren piloted with calm precision, her golden eyes focused on the navigation display. "We're approaching the hive core," she said, her voice steady. "Once we breach the outer defenses, we'll only have a narrow window to deploy the destabilization device." Jonathan nodded, his pulse quickening. No room for mistakes. The ship emerged from the nebula's swirling gas clouds, revealing the Kexan hive. It was a massive structure, resembling a twisted blend of organic tissue and mechanical spires, pulsing with eerie light. Swarms of Kexan drones moved in synchronized patterns around it. Jonathan's breath caught. "That's bigger than I expected." Ren's tone was grim. "It's not just their core, it's their heart. If we destroy it, we cut off their hive mind across the galaxy." She guided the ship toward a hidden approach, the cloaking field flickering as they neared the hive. The interference from the structure's energy output tested the limits of their technology. "Landing zone ahead," Ren announced. "Get ready." Jonathan grabbed the destabilization device from the cargo bay. "Let's hope this thing does what it's supposed to." They landed in a concealed crevice, the ship blending seamlessly with the terrain. Jonathan and Ren exited, weapons at the ready, as they made their way toward the access point Ren had identified during the briefing. The air was thick and humid, the ground beneath them pulsating with a faint rhythm that made Jonathan's skin crawl. "This place feels alive," Jonathan muttered, his voice low as he scanned their surroundings. Ren nodded, her golden eyes scanning the darkened corridors ahead. "It is," she replied quietly. "The hive isn't just a structure. It's part of their collective being." They moved in silence, careful not to make a sound as they navigated the labyrinthine passageways. The walls seemed to shift, pulsating with a life of their own, creating a disorienting effect that made it hard to focus. The air was thick with a strange energy, a constant hum that reverberated through the bones. Xan drones patrolled the area, their movements methodical and synchronized. Wren's advanced senses guided them around the patrols, her every decision precise. Jonathan followed her lead, the weight of their mission heavy in his mind. They had to get to the core, plant the destabilization device, and get out, quickly. As they neared the heart of the hive, the intensity of the hum increased. Jonathan's breath quickened. He could feel the ground tremble beneath his feet. This wasn't just an alien structure. It was the nerve center of an entire species. A place where all sand thought and action was directed. Wren paused at a corner, holding up a fist to signal him to stop. She peered around the edge, and Jonathan followed her gaze. Ahead, the entrance to the core chamber was guarded by a heavy cluster of drones. Wren turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Ready?" she whispered. Jonathan met her gaze. His pulse was racing, but his resolve was stronger than ever. "Let's do this,"